Hi you guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. I hope you guys are having a great day. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post a new true crime video every single week. So if you enjoy these videos and you want to see more, make sure to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I feel like times are so crazy right now. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but it's always like when you're coming up to the end of the year, I feel like there's so much that you want to get done or you feel like you need to get done. Like, I don't know. I feel so overwhelmed with work and, researching and filming, and I have to like keep up with everything, and it's kind of a lot. And on top of that, we're actually building a house right now. Don't know if you guys know, but we do have like a home build Instagram. So check it out over here if you're interested. But yeah, I'm also thinking about like starting a second YouTube channel maybe for like more personal lifestyle stuff, like maybe to show like the house. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that. I don't know. I feel like I have so many things I want to do and accomplish, but like, I don't know where to begin. So today's case was actually requested by Paris. And thank you, Paris, for always being so supportive of my true crime. You are so awesome. And you are also so lovely and supportive on my Instagram too. So thank you so much. But when she suggested this case, I was kind of like, I've heard of this case before, but then when I was researching it, I like totally remember it now, but I didn't know all the details of it. So I feel like you guys are really gonna find this one super interesting. So let's get into today's case. So today we are going to be talking about an Australian case, and we're going to be talking about Stephanie Scott. She was 26 years old and lived in the rural township of Leeton, which is in the Riverina region of New South Wales, Australia. And this town only had like 11,000 people living in it. And this town was known to be super friendly, the type of town that you like walk down and everyone waves at you. It's super friendly. It was a very safe town, and the worst crime at the time was probably like vandalism. Stephanie had actually grown up and spent majority of her life in an even smaller town called Canawindra, and it was in Canawindra that she had met the love of her life, Aaron Leeson Woolley. As teenagers, they worked in the local IGA, which is like a small local grocery store, and they would like hook up between the aisles, So after high school, Stephanie went to Charles Sturt University in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, another small town, and she studied teaching while Aaron, he stayed in Canawindra. Even though they were, pretty much long distance, their relationship not only survived, but it thrived. When Stephanie graduated from university, she landed a job at Leeton High School, and Aaron ended up getting a job at the local meatwork so that he could be with Stephanie and they could live in Leeton together. Stephanie was known as a beautiful, kind person who was loved by many people, and she actually became known in the town of Leeton due to her job as a school teacher. Stephanie was known to be super bubbly, and her kids at the school, they loved her. She always had them laughing during her English classes and her drama classes. Aaron was pretty quiet and ended up proposing to Stephanie during a trip to Thailand in 2014. And Stephanie was super happy, and she was really happy to plan their wedding. She was planning to use like little terracotta pots with like the guests' names on it for the place cards for their wedding. And they were due to marry on 11th April 2015. And this was the Saturday after Easter Sunday that year. And Stephanie was working really hard to make sure that their big day, went perfectly and every little detail was up to scratch. But most of all, she really wanted people to just have a good time. She was always putting other people before herself. And it was this trait of Stephanie, putting people always before herself, which landed Stephanie at Leeton High School on Easter Sunday. So on April 5th, 2015, Stephanie went to school that day, even though it was a Sunday, because she wanted to go to school and make sure that all her preparations for the substitute teacher who was replacing her while she was on her honeymoon in Tahiti would just have everything ready for her kids, and that there was no sort of like miscommunication, or she didn't want her students to, fall behind or miss out on anything while she was on her honeymoon. And she also wanted the transition for the substitute teacher to just go as smoothly as possible. So the night before, the April 4th, the Saturday, Aaron and Stephanie had actually been invited to a friend's house for a party, but Stephanie told Aaron, you know what, you just go ahead, go alone. I need to wake up early in the morning, go to the school, get everything ready. So you go ahead, go to the party. So he did. Aaron ended up going to the party at their friend's house by himself, and he ended up staying the night at his parents' house. But they kept in touch the whole night via texts, and they ended up saying goodnight to each other around 10:30 p.m. that night. So the next morning on the Sunday, Aaron gets a text from Stephanie letting him know that she's on her way to the school to finish up the last, of her preparations for that week. Then when Aaron was heading home, he tried to ring Stephanie a few times, but the calls just went unanswered, which was pretty strange for Stephanie. Then when he finally arrived home later that morning, he saw that Stephanie's car wasn't in the driveway and neither was Stephanie at home. A few hours later, he still hadn't heard from Stephanie and she still didn't arrive home. So he ended up calling some of her friends and then he ended up just driving around the town of Leeton looking for her. But hours and hours passed and no phone call from Stephanie, and she just never came home that night. So now it's the Monday and Aaron's like, okay, well, Stephanie still hasn't come home. I'm going to contact her family. Which I do wonder why people even wait so long. Like, for sure, if I, didn't answer my phone for like 3 hours, or like I didn't come home within an hour of when I was supposed to be coming home, 100% my husband would call the police. Like, there's zero chance. And I would too. Like, there's zero chance I would wait that long. And I always wonder why they always wait like for a whole day. I always wonder that. They knew Stephanie would never intentionally worry anyone, especially her husband. So the police were finally called and Stephanie was reported as missing. Repeated calls were made to her mobile, but they just kept ringing out, and then eventually it just altogether went to voicemail. The family ended up calling the local newspaper, which ended up sharing a story on their website and asked people, please be on the lookout for this lady. Her name is Stephanie Scott. Please be on the lookout for her. The community of Leeton was so tight-knit that they immediately sprung into action and the people started conducting searches of the area looking for Stephanie. Her parents, Robert and Marilyn, thought, maybe she crashed her car and she was like stuck somewhere. So they looked everywhere for her. And then a couple days later, Aaron appears on television and he just had like bags under his eyes and he was pleading for Stephanie to please contact him, whenever she found a phone or had access to a phone. But tragically, that day would never come. As time ticked by, her family just had to come to terms with the fact that possibly someone had taken Stephanie against her will. Marilyn says she tried to remain strong for her daughter, but she could barely eat or sleep. Every day would come and she would think, what if we don't find her today? And she said those thoughts would just plague her mind, but she tried to not think like that because you just can't stay positive that way. Police ended up establishing that the last known whereabouts of Stephanie were at Leeton High School. So officers ended up looking into whether anyone else was at the school at the same time that Stephanie was at the school. The deputy principal stated that he had in fact remembered that there was someone else at the school. The deputy principal recalled actually seeing one of the school's cleaners that day, Vincent Stanford, and he saw him on the Easter Friday. And then another resident in the area remembers seeing a white older ute, which is a car, at the school on Easter Sunday. And that was the same car that Vincent Stanford had been driving. So with this information, the police decided to interview Vincent Stanford, who was 24 years old and lived with his mother and his older brother. And they asked him about his whereabouts that Easter Sunday. So when he was questioned by the police as to where he was, he ended up telling the police that he was at the Golden Apple supermarket that day. So the police end up ringing the store to see if Vincent had attended that day, doing their job. And the supermarket staff tells the police, no, it was Easter Sunday. Our store was closed that day. So officers, they returned back to Vincent's house to question him again, but he wasn't home. But his mother gave the police permission to search the home. In Vincent's bedroom, they were shocked to find a set of school keys that belonged to Stephanie. When he returned home, Vincent told police that he was just out taking photos. And when he told the police that, the police were like, okay, well, give us your camera. He handed over his camera. The police end up opening up the camera, going through the footage, and they were horrified to discover that among the photos, there were photos of a body that was burnt beyond recognition. Vincent, however, said, oh, I didn't take those photos. Those are just some photos I, downloaded from the internet onto my camera. But then as officers kept searching his bedroom, they ended up finding handcuffs with blood on them. By this time, the cops were like, okay, 100% sure this guy has done something to Stephanie, possibly killed her, most likely killed her. So on Saturday, 11th April 2015, the day that would have been Stephanie and Aaron's wedding day, Vincent was arrested and charged with murder, aggravated sexual assault, and bodily harm. Vincent, who had, displayed violent tendencies from a young age, ended up just confessing to the murder. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next... No, I'm kidding. Let's get into what actually happened on that day. Why did Vincent target Stephanie? So because Stephanie was super diligent, she was professional. She loved her job, and she was always thinking of other people. She decided to go into the school to, as I said before, prepare everything and make sure that the kids were set up well, and then the substitute teacher was set up well for her absence. Her killer, Vincent, wasn't supposed to be there. He was a school cleaner who was only supposed to work there during the week. He would later tell police that he had initially seen Stephanie that day in the school staff room, and the urge to kill her had just come over him. He didn't plan to do it, but he just had to. He states that after he saw her, he ended up going back home because he wanted to bring back his rape kit that was complete with a knife and handcuffs. When he returned back to school after collecting this kit, he told police that he waited for Stephanie to leave the school, and she did notice him on her way out to the car park. And as she saw him, Stephanie happily said, "Happy Easter," and just waved goodbye to him. As she tried to leave, he pounced on her, put his right arm over Stephanie's mouth and his left arm over her middle, and she struggled as he walked backwards, dragging her down a hallway into a storeroom. Vincent weighed 120 kilos. He had total control and could have easily just pushed her to the floor. But instead, this sicko repeatedly punched Stephanie in the face until she blacked out. He assaulted her, and then he grabbed a knife from his pocket that was 40 centimeters long, and he ended up stabbing Stephanie in the neck. He claims he went a little nuts, and he confessed to beating her 30 or 40 times. He was so smug, almost like proud of his behavior. And he told police that after he did all this, he ended up returning home, grabbed, a cheese sandwich and a cup of coffee for lunch. And later he returned to the school to clean up the storeroom and then get rid of, her body. He said he tried to stop the bleeding with yellow masking tape around her neck. And then he put her body in her own car in her red Mazda in the trunk. And then he drove her car to his house and then left her car there in his backyard behind his shed overnight. The next day, he drove her car with her body in it to Cocopara National Park, which is around an hour away from the school. And he removed her body from the car. He placed branches over it, and he ended up setting fire to it. Like, this guy is such a sicko. He's such a sicko that wasn't enough for him, seeing, what he had done to this poor lady. He ended up grabbing his camera and taking pictures of her remains, just for fun. There are no words to describe this man. So then he takes Stephanie's red Mazda 3 car and ends up driving it towards his home, like on the way home. But then he dumps it at a field along the way home, which was around 8 kilometers away from Leeton. Leeton locals were so horrified and so upset by this, knowing that this guy had been living in the town for over a year. He was not super friendly to everyone, but he was known by everyone. Like, everyone knew who he was because, like I said before, it was a small town. While he was talking to police claim that he was so calm, he just sat calmly at the table with his hands on the table. And one of the police officers said that it just looked like he was just at the bank opening up a bank account. Like, he had no dramas. Like, he was just so calm. He was so unaffected. Like, he just didn't seem to care about anything about the whole situation. He ends up telling the police that he had to kill her. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. He was just emotionless. He just knew that he had to kill her. Like, that he had to do. So on April 9th, 2015, Vincent was charged with murdering Stephanie Scott. And on June 3rd, 2015, he was charged with aggravated sexual assault. He claimed that he hardly even remembered killing Stephanie, and he didn't even feel guilty about it because it was just something he had to do. Then came a twist. Around 2 months after the murder took place, on June 10th, 2015, police end up arresting Vincent's twin brother, Marcus. Vincent had actually sent Stephanie's driver's license and her engagement ring to Marcus, who was living in Adelaide, South Australia at the time. And Marcus actually handled and then sold the rings, and he also photographed and then burned the license. And when I was researching this, I found out that there have been cases where identical twins have been able to get away with committing a crime by blaming it on their siblings because they share the same DNA. So we don't really know what these two guys were planning, but Marcus stated that he just had like misplaced loyalty to his brother Vincent when he disposed of the evidence and he failed to report a possible crime, or it was a crime, because why else would Vincent have engagement rings and the driver's license of a woman? Marcus was sentenced to 15 months in jail. So on 20th July 2016, Vincent appears at the New South Wales Supreme Court and he pleads guilty to murder and aggravated sexual assault. And the court heard that Vincent had actually been having these, horrible thoughts of killing people from the age of 7 or 8, and that he told psychologists that he didn't actually enjoy killing, but that it was something that needed to be done to relieve the tension from the need to kill. He considered himself someone who hated being touched, had practiced self-mutilation, and he enjoyed the isolation that his job in cleaning provided him. And he told the psychologist that he just couldn't tolerate people and he had thoughts of killing people from as long as he can remember. Okay. Vincent was born in Tasmania and raised here in Australia until his parents, Annika and Steve, moved him, his twin brother, and his older brother, Luke, to the Netherlands when he was around 3 years old. And soon after the family moved to the Netherlands, the father, Stephen, ended up leaving the family and he returned to Australia and had no further contact with his 3 kids. The 3 boys were raised in the Netherlands by their mother, and there was no evidence to show that they had sort of a bad childhood. They had a fairly normal childhood, and he told psychologists that he had an all right relationship with most members of his family, but he wasn't particularly close with his older brother, Luke. In 2003, he was actually expelled from a school in the Netherlands because he had a violent outburst towards a teacher, and he actually grabbed her by the throat. Psychological testing found that he actually had a pattern of social and interpersonal deficits, including the capacity to experience emotions, extreme detachment, and indifference to just other human beings. He actually had elevated scores in the sadistic/aggressive scale, but he scored a really low range for psychopathic tendencies. But the two are one and the same, aren't they really? Vincent had actually been stalking a number of women in the town of Leeton, And police found thousands of photographs and notes about the movements of certain women and when they would be alone. And one of the women he was stalking was actually just a 12-year-old girl. And he made notes in his book that he wanted to abduct this girl. He had like 1,800 photos of her on his computer, along with like a whole book about notes on her schedule and, her ballet school. He also actually became obsessed with a young girl who worked at a Leighton supermarket, and police found evidence of multiple searches on his computer, like trying to learn more about her and like who she was. Such a creep. He was also monitoring one of Stephanie's co-workers. Like, this woman often stayed late at the school because she would try to like tidy up the classroom and prepare for the next day. So he really almost could have hurt this other woman as well because she was always alone. When the police were looking at Vincent's computer, they found a ton of searches on violent rape scenes. And a lot of them were directed towards like teachers, like they were teacher fantasies. And just weeks before he committed this crime, search terms on his computer included bride rape, bride kidnapping, virgin bride brutally raped. Like it was worse. Like it was worse than some of the stuff I'm saying. Like it was really horrible search terms. And it's like, when you Google that stuff, does stuff actually come up? Like, I don't really want to know, but at the same time, I kind of do want to know. Like, is that, like, do you know what I mean? Like, when you Google really messed up things. Oh my God, I'm like answering my own question. I know the world is sick. The internet is so sick. There was one search term that like was so disgusting. Like, it was so detailed. I don't even want to say it. Like, it was so detailed that I'm just like, who thinks of these things? Like, this search term was, oh my God, it was horrible. I don't want to traumatize you guys. There was also like terms about Japanese porn, like about students, sick. And then the day before he committed the crime on Stephanie, there were search terms such as like widowmaker, widow knives, sharpest knife tips, like how to sharpen knives. Like it was weird. This sicko wants to maintain that the attack he conducted on Stephanie was not premeditated, but look at his search terms. Like clearly he wanted to do this to someone in the near future. A psychologist actually described him as horrifying, that he had a combination of cold-blooded and sadistic tendencies. While he was sent to prison to await trial, Stephanie's family was just left there having to cope with the grief of what happened to them. Vincent had no remorse. Like, he was like, it happened so long ago. Like, don't even make me think about it, guys. In his sentencing, the judge described the crime as highly disturbing. He stated the fact that Vincent just, went home, had a cheese sandwich and a cup of coffee after he committed this horrible act, and then calmly goes back to the school to clean up the crime, load her body into the car. Like, it was so sick and so deranged that it was so sick. And what could it take a human being to even behave this way after committing something so horrible? And especially in that small little tiny town, like these kinds of things don't happen. So he sentenced Vincent to life in prison. And this was like a bittersweet ending for Stephanie's family and for her fiance, Aaron. Her mum, Marilyn, just stated, how could this even happen? Like, one day we had this beautiful girl and then next day she's just gone. On the eve of what should have been Stephanie and Aaron's wedding, the police announced that they had located the burnt remains of a human body at the Kokopara National Park. And in a show of amazing strength, Stephanie's family actually invited the community to join them the next day on the wedding day for a picnic to celebrate the life of Stephanie. Instead of her wedding day that was supposed to take place that day, they held a memorial for Stephanie where everyone dressed in yellow, which was her favorite color, and the song the couple intended to have their first dance to, it was by Keith Urban, I think, called Making Memories of Us, was played at her funeral instead. In the town of Leighton, all the businesses closed down for the period of 1 to 2 p.m. to just show respect to Stephanie and her family. And the heart of that town and the entire nation, honestly, had been broken. And now, as I'm even just saying it, like, it's just crazy to think that it's a week. It was 1 week in between her death and her wedding day. So the fact that a memorial was taking place on the day of what should have been her wedding, like, isn't that crazy? Like how life takes a turn. It's insane to me. And this case, again, is so scary to me. It's like the Jill Meagher case that I covered a few videos ago. It's so scary because it can just happen to anyone. Like these type of people who commit these crimes, I mean, I think it's worse if they're stalking you and stuff because it's kind of like you're the target. But this is also bad too because they're not even targeting you. You're just like, they just have to kill. You know what I mean? Just one day they have to kill and it's your turn. It's like, that is so scary to me. And especially when I was younger, like there have been so many close calls for me. I don't know. Do you guys enjoy story time? I feel like I have so many crazy stories and things that have happened to me that, I don't know. It's like I could share so much. Stephanie's life seemed to be beautiful. She was on her way to her happily ever after. Oh, it's just the saddest case. Let me know your thoughts on this case below, guys. We as women, we just have to stay vigilant and be aware of our surroundings, I believe, at all times. Like, oh, it's crazy. You never know what's going to happen, for real. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. It would mean so much to me. And I will see you in my next video, guys. Besitos. Mwah! Bye.